is Crystal Rainbrock. I'm a poet and actress and owner of Free Flow Poetry and Theater Company. We operate out of Detroit. We use the Lighthouse Theater. We have also used the YMCA Bowl Theater. Those are ours.
Sean P. Entertainment, Sean P. Williams. Basically been doing plays since 2006, and I go anywhere and everywhere that somebody let me in.
I'm Charles Winfrey. I'm with the New McCree Theater, located in Flint, Michigan.
I'm with Charles. I'm Kathy.
She's our director, right-hand person.
Gary, would you lead off?
Sure. What exactly do you want me to lead off?
Black Theater, just pick up from the film in terms of your struggle and then go from there into, and then pass it on.
Well, I won't necessarily talk about struggle because I think it's all challenges. I think the interesting thing about the film, unfortunately, is that most of the theaters highlighted in that film are no longer around. That, in fact, only two of them, and one of them recently actually was salvaged. The Barbara Ann Tears National Black Theater was recently saved by a group of business people coming together and trying to stabilize it after her passing and the challenges that she had in regards to keeping it solvent. And then you have Woody King Jr.'s new federal theater that's still producing a lot of work. The challenges really, I think, that occurs in regards to our institutions is really in regards to how they are sustained. If you look economically at the organizations, nonprofit organizations, theaters particularly, across the country have varying degrees, varying funding sources, either through the box office, through corporations, foundations, and individual donations. If you look at a traditionally white institution, 30 to 6% of their income on an annual basis, depending upon the economy, is generated through individual giving. The rest of it is made up through a mixture of corporate support, foundation support, and box office. When you look at our institutions, less than 8% comes from individual giving. And we make up the vast majority of it from corporate support and foundation support we can get, which is not consistent, and box office. I think that says pretty clearly why many of ours have short span of existence and why you have white cultural organizations that can withstand the test of time. It's really a challenge. Now, there's two sides of that. If we as organizations expect support from the community, we should be reciprocal. Our work ought to be relevant and responsive to you. Our work ought to be focusing on uplifting and empowering you. And our work ought to have your input in it. Those are the things that really, I think, at times have a real challenge of being sustained because we don't always, that's not always a two-way street. But that's really the mechanism for not, as David put it, not being focused on the struggle. It's not really about the struggle. I mean, yes, there are challenges. Every organization has growth and contraction over the lifetime of its existence. But it's really about, if we are serious about sustaining these organizations, we also need to be serious about how we are engaged in that sustainability.
Yes, I definitely agree with what Gary is saying. The support of Black theater and Black artists in general doesn't seem to be as popular. And a lot of it, you do have to rely, when it comes to theater, on the community, especially if you're not getting the federal grants or anything like that, or foundations, or having a lot of backing. And it just seems to be very, as far as looking at the past, there was a lot of interest. There was like, you have more movements going on, you have more things going on, so to say. And I think people are kind of sidetracked now, that the theater isn't as important as what it used to be. Storytelling isn't as important as what it used to be. A lot of people are getting into the poetry scene, but the theater scene, as far as in the Black community, has taken a step back. They don't seem to be interested in socially conscious. I've had a we haven't recently put on a socially conscious play that was relevant within the Black community as well as in other communities. I had someone tell me I should add some songs. And I said, and that was one of my things moving back from New York City. I don't know where this play format came from, and I called my friend after seeing the show saying, I don't know what I just saw. That's not a play, or that's not the format of a play. So it's become very, I don't want to say dumbed down. I'm not sure if that goes along with our school systems, and I have someone tell me that, you know, according to how some theater, the theater in the schools are not what they used to be as well. And I can't remember the name of the school, but their theater program isn't as good. So the interest really isn't there. And it's, what I was talking about with people and trying to discuss is how to gain that interest back to where you have people coming back to the theater, Black communities coming back to the theater to support local artists as well as, you know, other artists, not just big names, so to say. There's a lot of what people have to say in the local community, as you know, you can see.
I have to agree with you and everybody 100%. But one thing I done learned from doing stuff, if that's what the audience want to see, sometimes you have to do it. Like you say, if it's a gospel song you got to throw in there, you throw it in there. You know, I don't know, in my opinion, I don't know if that's a play or not a play. When I was brought up, we learned about Helen Keller, we did the Miracle Worker and all that. In schools now, they don't even have theater. They don't even have theater in a lot of the schools. So really, we don't know what they get or what they not getting. My thing is, I always believe, is people out there who love to enjoy stuff. This is one of the other things they did. I didn't went to plays back in the day, and I used to enjoy all the plays I went to. Now I still go to plays. Some might be at the Fisher, some might be at the Fox, some might be at the Repertory. You know, but that's maybe one of the biggest problems, where people not seeing different things and seeing the different things that's offered. Because I didn't enjoy plays at the Repertory, I didn't enjoy plays at the Fox, but it all come together that we have to work together in the community and help one another.
I agree with what everyone has said. Audience development with us is a double-edged sword. Not only do we want to fill seats in our venue, but we also have to educate, you know, our audience as to the meaning and the significance and the value, you know, of African American theater. So a large part of our job, you know, is educating the value of theater in our lives. What we have started doing at McCree Theater, and it sort of fits with the headlines that Flint is encountering nowadays, is that we do a violence prevention play that's directed to young audiences, and we bus them in from, you know, various surrounding school districts, elementary students, to the theater, you know, so that we're doing a twofold. We're empowering them, you know, to withstand the violence that's surrounding them, and we're also acquainting them with theater, you know, so they get a taste of theater early, and hopefully, you know, as they go through life, theater will be a part of their life.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's one of the things that we're trying to do. But I tell you, we just did a season that included 2 August Wilsons and a Lorraine Hansberry. And we almost died as a result of it. Because invariably, people are going to come up to you and say, I don't like dramas, I want to be entertained. And, you know, and that might be valid, you know. Because in Flint, you know, entertainment might be, you know, a big deal. Because of all the negativity, you know, surrounding our residents. So, you know, I don't think we need to make apologies for entertainment, you know, but we have to stay true, you know, to the art as well, and that's a delicate balance.
You know, that's interesting that you say that, because it's not, there's nothing wrong with entertaining, you're absolutely right about that. But if a child is given their wishes, I think they need cotton candy a hell of a lot more than they would eat broccoli.
Right.
But for a healthy child to grow up, they need a basic, stable diet that exists, that consists of more than just cotton candy. And if you're looking at it in regards to the cultural expression, you really want to see work that is reflective of you. The people in this film that we just saw, all those people were struggling to make a statement about the very existence of African American people in this country that had never been expressed before. And Black theater is the only art form African American writers have ever had that has allowed them to do what they want unfiltered. You understand what I'm saying about that? It is the only art form where we have been able to say what we feel strongly in an uncompromised manner. It hasn't had to go through an editor that says, well, I don't know if that's going to work very well. It hasn't had to go through a producer that's put it on and say, well, I don't know if that film is going to sell in Kansas City. It's been here. This is the stage in which we've been able to say exactly what works. And if we're going to replicate what you can get out of somebody else's perspective on us, then what's the use of us? I can see why audiences are declining if we're only providing them with the exact same thing they get from somebody else. As simple as that.
Let me jump in on that.
Go right
Since it
ahead.
was my next turn. Anyway, let me,
I apologize, I'm sorry.
That's okay, don't be sorry. To bounce on everybody else's and understanding, there is still a movement going on that's in theater that most of us are very familiar with, but most of us don't go because it's the floetry poetry. And that's a sense of a theater production with everybody giving their vocal speeches. Now, most of them don't have the cultural history of where theater came from. So we're looking at a whole another generation of people that we have to bring back to the theater. So even with the entertainment, because we discuss this a lot at McCree, but many times our audiences do come for the music, regardless of what type of music it is. But the music draws the people. They're more expensive to produce, but the music draws in the audiences. The plays, even though we just did Raisin in the Sun, and I'm telling you, it was Broadway quality. And the audience was, some were there. I don't know what happened the last weekend, I was gone, but people should have been there and they weren't. And how do we reach the masses in that arena to get them back into the theater? And the way to do that, again, is what Charles was talking about, building the audience. And sometimes we do that in second education. But we're missing the younger generation, those of us that are younger than we are. And they have their own format that they're basing themselves on, is through the poetry, floetry, which is still the spoken word. But they're out there doing it. And that's where the audience is going. I work at an arts council also, and almost every weekend we're renting out the arts council, and I go by there, there's hundreds and hundreds of people in there watching this particular program. So there's some way we need to reconnect the theater and this type of poetry to bring them back to the theater. That's just a thought.
I was gonna ask or suggest, like when different theater companies are doing plays like a Raisin in the Sun or Fences, why not incorporate like one gospel new play where you get an audience of people? Because I know some people have never been to the repertory theater, and I tell them, repertory theater is over there. A lot of them don't even know where it's at, and that's the younger crowd or people my age. I consider myself old school, but a lot of people don't. I'm like, I'm 41, so, you know.
Okay, are you thinking, okay, first off, number one, I'm not the Detroit
Right,
rep.
right.
Number two, Detroit rep is not a black theater.
Right, that's true
So why
too.
are you keep looking at me?
Oh, no, I'm just asking questions in general.
Okay.
Like, you know, like he didn't just did a Raisin in the Sun and you did. So I'm saying, when you do a full season, why not do like one new show, one old show, and all that? Like in New York, what did they do? They put Sean P. Diddy Combs and a Raisin in the Sun. And I went to New York to go see it. So some people will do certain things to see things. You know, we don't know. You know, I'm just saying as an ideal, you know, like mixing it in. That's what I was asking.
I'm Mark Douglas, and I'm a playwright, and I do some plays. That particular format you're talking about, I tried it, and it actually works. But it takes a lot of marketing. But I would do one of my musical plays that has music. Then I would do a classic, like I did Raisin in the Sun. I did Checkmates. I did Amen Corner, Pearly Victorious. In between doing the musicals. And once they got used to coming to the musicals, they would come and see the classics. A lot of them don't know what the classics are.
Right.
Most of them thought I wrote a Raisin in the Sun. No. But once you get that format going and sustain it for a couple of years, you can, it'll work. It'll work.
But see, to me, that just goes right back to education. How do you not know the first, I mean, she's the first African who wrote A Raisin in the Sun. That goes right back to education and what you're learning at home. When I was growing up, and because my mom, she had decided to move to the suburbs, she goes, I don't know what they do around here for Black History, but y'all stand. I mean, she just didn't know because it wasn't her world where she came from. She knew what went on in Detroit. She knew the world, you know, in Louisiana. We didn't know that world, so she had to learn that. But all the time in our house, we always had something about Black history on. I mean, Black history to me was like every day. You knew who Maya Angelou was. You knew who Raisin in the Sun was. We had encyclopedias. That goes back to what you're doing at home and how come your children don't know about the classics and the greats and the people who didn't speak, they didn't have to make up words. You know, there's a lot of times, and I love the poetry scene because I'm also a poet, but a lot of times you're making up words.
Right.
That's, you know, it's okay because you're trying to express yourself, but when you're making up something, it's not real to you. It's real to you, but you know, sometimes, I mean, they spoke eloquently. Like listening to him, he had a little, you know, slang and things like that. But to me, if it's not worded the way Sean P. Diddy Combs would word something, or worded the way, I don't know, Jay-Z or Kanye is going to say it, you know, they're not interested in listening to that. And when I go to the schools, you see it. I've gone to schools to do, what do you call those, like career days. And I was very disappointed with the Detroit school versus I went to one Detroit school and one school that was in the suburbs. And I was very disappointed. You know, it just really took me back. You know, he had kids who were paying attention and listening, whether they were interested or not, but they knew how to act, how to behave. They knew at least what I was talking about. They had an active theater program. Kids were involved in the theater. And then I had kids who, when I was saying things, it didn't seem like they knew what I was talking about. And to me, that's a big disadvantage. You shouldn't want to be at a disadvantage, and people should know who, and the kids should know who Angela Lansbury is. They should know who everyone is. All of the greats, James Earl Jones. You know, that was a distinctive voice. If he was playing a cartoon character, we were little kids, oh, that's James Earl Jones. And you would sit there and listen.
Or you say
We knew exactly who it was.
You say Doug Davis.
My name is David Head. I like to consider myself an education historical advocate. And I'm from New York City. I just moved into Detroit. And those people up there, I'm familiar with. Abiola Sinclair was a theater critic for the Amsterdam News. She was my mentor. And I'm doing a STEM program for the kids in New York, in Detroit now, with some educators and engineers. But beyond that, I think what we have to do today is bridge the gap. Because the kids this generation has been dumbed down, like you said, and there's a challenge to bridge that gap. And you got to find a way to connect with the people that are very artistic, the young people, and they are few. And you got to reach out to them and collaborate with them, educate them, and let them know that each generation must define, examine, interpret, and claim the history through by any means necessary. So you got to find a way to bridge that gap. That's the challenge, I think, one of the challenges you face in connecting with the younger generation.
One of the ways you bridge it is, as opposed to doing STEM, you do STEAM. Science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, as opposed to doing STEM.
Right.
So if you already have a background and you understand the importance of this, you should maybe want to get your partners to reimagine what they're doing.
Well, we're gonna do part of history,
I
definitely.
understand the history, but I'm talking about bringing the arts as a critical part of that approach to teaching. Because right now, it's not there.
Mhm.
Question. In your opinion, what do you think is necessary for Detroit to get a good playhouse? Now, you mentioned about the repertory, which is white-owned, and it's been going strong for years. And a lot of black actors, some of the finest. Now, why can't this, should we say, talent go into a playhouse for Detroit? Once upon a time, there was a lady here, Maggie Porter, had Harmony Park, which was good. She made a miracle out of that place for what she was doing in that little place. She really did. It's a shame it had to go under. Now, I'd like to see another Harmony Park myself. I know it's out there, but what does it take? I mean, this is a talented city. Well, we know it takes money.
No, seriously, that's what it takes. It takes serious investment.
And the equipment is not cheap. I remember when Robert Bob was going to do his little thing with all the schools, I had to go over to Northwestern and speak with him. And I noticed the theater that they had there at Northwestern. They had some equipment in there that was out of sight. Matter of fact, it was so good that the engineers came over to Northwestern and copied some of it and put it in the newscast deck. So now, is there a possibility that someone could start a playhouse at Northwestern? I'm sure people would come to the high school to see a play. If you can't just get out here and get a building of your own and finance it and get the equipment, because that equipment costs money.
You'll find it very challenging. You'll find it.
I'm sure it'd be
No, I mean,
challenging, but we should have one here.
But the school system won't allow that to happen.
The school system online? Well, so
I'm
many
sorry.
things right now,
Schools are
the school
very
system's not doing that they should have did, that when we went to school, we got an education.
You pose a very interesting question, which is good, which reminds me of something Langston Hughes wrote when he talked, I think it's the Macau, but I'm not sure the title of it.
Okay.
And he says they took our music and they changed it, they took our theater and they changed it. Well, who's going to stand up and do something about it?
Okay.
Oh, I can do it. So I will put it back to you. If you have such
Well, I am doing some things
If
already.
you have such a desire and a passion, then you should be the beginning, because it takes leadership to get people to come, to gather together and collaborate.
This is
with
something.
partners.
Whoa, let
Right.
it finish. Let the lady finish, okay?
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be rude.
good. I'm
Okay,
good.
but when you said about, well, go ahead, somebody, please, again.
There's
Go ahead.
one of the notes that I was taking earlier. Joan Urbana Brown, who just recently retired from ETA in Chicago, after 25 years of just grunge work, they finally built and opened a gorgeous new building in Chicago, just in the last couple of years. And that's really what it takes to stay focused, like the pioneers did. Stay focused. If you make $100 a year or whatever it takes, you just have to never, ever, ever give up. A friend of mine was just hired as band director at Central High School here in Detroit. And he calls me routinely to get advice. And I said to him, you know what, Harriet Tubman, made all these trips back to the South to free us in spite of, at the time in the 1890s had a $100,000 price tag on her head, in some of the worst times in history. But, her idea was, excuse the language, nigga, you'll be free or you'll be dead. And we just have to take that take no prisoners attitude. And I think this meeting today is a step in that direction.
Yeah, in Chicago, not only is the ETA Theater doing great things, but Jackie Taylor just built a $15 million theater on the north side of Chicago. And some people might question you know, Jackie's preference for, you know, for what she produces. But nevertheless, it enabled her to build that structure that we can all be proud of. And, you know, it provides work for black actors, it provides work for black musicians, and it provides, you know, work for a venue, you know, for black playwrights. You know, so, and she does all musicals, all musicals.
But Charles, why don't you talk about your experience in keeping New McCree alive? And you have this, you know, building, you know,
Well,
although it's very cheap,
yeah,
you know.
the jury is still out on the building.
Right, right.
But
what happened with that?
Well, you know, we started out as tenants in this building that was owned by the Urban League of Flint. And, you know, we rented their theater, their auditorium as our theater space and some office space. But the Urban League of Flint went belly up, which left us alone, you know, in this huge former school building. But, you know, we're working at it. You know, what has happened is that we've had to call in more troops to help us, and we have to do more fundraising because it's an old school building with old, you know, appliances, old furnaces, old boilers, and high utility bills. So, you know, that sort of added to the struggle that we were already fighting to build an audience. And you would think that after so many years, the audience would just be automatic, like it is in Chicago. You know, the beautiful thing about Athens Theater or ETA or a Black Ensemble Theater is that you have to stand in line, you know, to get a ticket. And if you don't get your ticket early, you may not ever see the show.